Pacific Northwest holds 20 wild places where volcanic peaks rise from ancient forests and coastlines fracture into sea stacks battered by Pacific storms. This is a region shaped by fire, ice, and time on scales that dwarf human memory. From the shattered crater of Mount St. Helens to the glacial slopes of Rainier, from the moss-draped silence of the Hoh rainforest to the turquoise depths of Crater Lake, the land shifts between extremes with startling speed. One moment, temperate rainforest. The next, alpine wilderness scoured by wind. Then coastal cliffs where waves have carved stone for 10,000 years. The Cascade Range alone contains more than a dozen major volcanoes. Ask their dormant summits holding enough thermal energy to reshape entire valleys overnight. East of the mountains, the Columbia River Gorge cuts through basalt layers laid down by lava floods that once covered an area the size of a small country. West, the Olympic Peninsula receives more annual rainfall than almost anywhere else in the continental United States, feeding forests where individual trees have stood for 8 centuries. This is a road trip through a living atlas of extremes, where every turn reveals a landscape that speaks its own geological language. Yet all remain bound by the same restless forces that built the Pacific Rim. This living atlas of extremes opens at a place where the Earth rewrote itself in a single morning. Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument stands as ground zero for one of the most violent geological events in North American memory. On May 18, 1980, the mountain's north face collapsed in a lateral blast that flattened 230 square miles of forest in minutes. Today, the monument preserves this landscape in various stages of recovery, offering a rare window into how life reclaims devastated ground. Spirit Lake once reflected the perfect cone of the old summit in waters surrounded by dense evergreen forest. The eruption changed everything. A massive debris avalanche swept into the lake, raising its surface by 200 feet and filling it with thousands of floating logs. These ghostly timber mats still drift across the water decades later, slowly sinking as they waterlog. The lake itself has become a living laboratory, its waters gradually clearing as new ecosystems take hold beneath the surface. Lewitt Falls cascades down the inner walls of the volcano's crater, fed by melting snow and glacial ice that has reformed since the blast. The falls drop over 300 feet in a thin white ribbon against dark volcanic rock. Steam sometimes rises from nearby vents, a reminder that the mountain merely sleeps. Reaching a viewpoint requires effort, but those who make the trek witness water and fire meeting in a landscape still actively healing from catastrophic transformation. From the recovering slopes of St. Helens, we turn toward the most iconic summit of them all. This dormant volcano rises more than 14,000 feet above sea level. Visible from cities 100 miles distant on clear days. 26 glaciers cling to its flanks, containing more ice than all other Cascade volcanoes combined. The mountain dominates the horizon like a frozen sentinel. Its presence felt long before reaching park boundaries. The Nisqually Glacier offers the most accessible window into Rainier's frozen world. This river of ice has been retreating for over a century, leaving behind raw moraines and milky meltwater streams. Visitors can observe its terminal face from viewpoints along the road. You're watching ice that fell as snow centuries ago finally reach its end. The glacier carved the valley below into a textbook U-shape. Its ancient power written into every cliff and boulder field. Higher up the mountain, the Paradise area earns its name through fields of wildflowers that erupt each summer. Subalpine meadows burst with lupine, paintbrush, and avalanche lilies once the snow retreats. Historic Paradise Inn stands among these slopes. Its massive timber frame, built in 1916 from local cedar. Trails radiate outward toward waterfalls, snowfields, and viewpoints where the summit seems close enough to touch. On the mountain's northeast shoulder, the sunrise area provides a completely different perspective. At over 6,000 feet, it ranks as the highest point reachable by vehicle in Washington state. Dawn light strikes the summit here first, painting glaciers in shades of pink and gold. From these meadows, visitors gaze across to the Emmons Glacier, the largest ice mass in the lower 48 states. Its crevassed surface stretching toward the crater rim above. Beyond Rainier's glacial heights, the landscape shifts westward to where rainfall reaches its peak and ancient trees drink from perpetual mist. This peninsula holds three distinct worlds within its borders. Glaciated mountains rise at the center. Temperate rainforests blanket the western valleys. And a wild Pacific coastline stretches for 73 miles without interruption. Few places on Earth contain such dramatic shifts within a single day's drive. The Hoh rainforest stands as one of the finest examples of temperate rainforest remaining in North America. Annual rainfall here exceeds 12 feet, creating conditions found in only a handful of locations worldwide. Sitka spruce and western red cedar tower overhead, their trunks wrapped in thick coats of moss and fern. Fallen giants become nurse logs, sprouting new generations of trees along their decomposing spines. Light filters green through the canopy. Sound softens in the moisture-heavy air. Walking these trails feels like moving through a living cathedral built by centuries of uninterrupted growth. Rialto Beach marks where the rainforest meets the sea. Driftwood logs the size of shipping containers pile along the shore, tossed there by winter storms. Sea stacks rise from the surf like broken teeth, their bases carved by relentless waves. Tide pools hold starfish and anemones in shallow basins worn into the rock. The beach stretches north toward Hole in the Wall, a natural arch eroded through a coastal headland over thousands of years. Ruby Beach offers a different view of the same wild shore. Rust-colored pebbles give the sand its name, mixed with polished stones, tumbled smooth by endless tides. Abbey Island anchors the northern view, accessible at low tide for those willing to time their crossing carefully. Bald eagles patrol the waterline. Harbor seals rest on distant rocks. This coast remains largely unchanged from how it appeared when the first humans walked these shores more than 10,000 years ago. South into Oregon, fire and water find perfect stillness in a single, extraordinary place. Crater Lake National Park sits high in the Oregon Cascades, cradling the deepest lake in the United States. Nearly 8,000 years ago, Mount Mazama collapsed into itself after a violent eruption. What remained was a caldera that slowly filled with rain and snowmelt, untouched by rivers or streams. The water here reaches depths of nearly 2,000 feet. No sediment clouds its clarity. Sunlight penetrates far below the surface, absorbing every color except the deepest blues. On calm days, the lake becomes a mirror so perfect that sky and water merge into a single plane. Surrounding cliffs rise steeply from the shoreline, their volcanic rock faces streaked with rust and ochre. Rising from the western waters, Wizard Island breaks the lake's smooth surface with its conical silhouette. This small volcanic cone formed centuries after the Great Collapse, built by eruptions on the caldera floor. A crater of its own crowns the summit, 90 feet across and filled with hardy shrubs. Trails wind through mountain hemlock to the top, where hikers stand above one of the purest bodies of water on Earth. The island earned its name from its pointed shape, said to resemble a sorcerer's hat when early morning mist drifts across the blue. Turning north from Crater Lake Stillness, we enter one of the most rugged corners of the Cascade Range. North Cascades National Park sprawls across nearly 3,000 square kilometers of jagged peaks and hanging glaciers. More than 300 glaciers cling to these mountains, the highest concentration in any American park outside Alaska. The terrain here resists easy passage, with steep valleys and knife-edge ridges that kept much of this wilderness unmapped until the 20th century. Deep within this fortress of rock and ice lies Diablo Lake, a body of water that appears almost unreal at first sight. The lake glows with an intense turquoise color that shifts throughout the day. This striking hue comes from glacial flour, fine rock particles ground by moving ice high in the surrounding peaks. Suspended in the water, these particles scatter sunlight in ways that create colors found nowhere else in the region. Diablo Dam holds back these waters, built in the 1920s to power the growing city of Seattle. The lake stretches through a valley flanked by steep forested slopes that plunge directly into the water. From overlooks along the North Cascades Highway, the view reveals layer upon layer of ridges, fading into blue distance. In autumn, golden larches dot the mountainsides, their reflection doubling the color against that impossible turquoise surface. Not far from the North Cascades Glacial Fortress, another wilderness demands even more from those who seek it. Tucked high in the central Cascades, this protected stretch of granite and ice holds more than 700 lakes scattered across nearly 400,000 acres. The terrain rises sharply from lowland forest into a realm where glaciers carved the stone and left behind basins that fill each spring with snowmelt. This is country that rewards patience and punishes haste in equal measure. The enchantments form the jeweled core of this wilderness. A chain of alpine lakes sits cradled between jagged peaks, their waters shifting from deep sapphire to pale turquoise depending on the hour and season. Larch trees cling to the rocky slopes, turning gold each autumn in a display that draws hikers from across the country. Permits remain fiercely competitive, with thousands applying for the chance to spend a single night among these high basins. Those who arrive find a landscape stripped to its essential elements, where stone and water and sky merge into something close to silence. Kolchak Lake serves as the gateway for many who venture into this alpine sanctuary. Its milky blue waters rest beneath Dragontail Peak, the surface reflecting cliffs that rise nearly straight up from the shoreline. The hike-in covers 4 miles through forest before opening suddenly onto this glacial pool. Boulders the size of small cabins line the shore, remnants of rockfall from the faces above. From Kolchak, the route to the upper enchantments climbs through Asgard Pass. This scramble gains nearly 2,000 feet in less than a mile, a steep chute of loose rock and determination. Snow lingers here well into summer, making each step a careful negotiation with the mountain. Those who reach the top stand at the threshold of the core zone, where the chain of lakes unfolds northward like a string of frozen jewels set in granite. Descending from those granite heights, we follow water eastward to where ancient lava floods carved their deepest scar. This 80-mile canyon slices through basalt walls that rise more than 4,000 feet above the river. Water shaped this corridor over millions of years, and water continues to pour from its cliffs in dramatic fashion. The gorge holds the highest concentration of waterfalls in North America, each one fed by streams draining the rain-soaked slopes above. Multnomah Falls commands attention as the crown jewel of this collection. The water drops 620 feet in 2 distinct tiers, separated by a rocky ledge where a historic footbridge spans the cascade. Mist drifts across the viewing area even on dry days. The falls draw visitors year-round. Their flow strongest during spring snowmelt, when the volume can triple overnight. Waklela Falls lies tucked deeper into the forest, reached by a trail that follows Tanner Creek through moss-covered boulders. The path crosses wooden footbridges before arriving at a natural amphitheater where the falls split around a central rock formation. This 2-tiered cascade drops into a pool so clear the stones beneath remain visible. The surrounding canyon walls create an echo chamber where the sound of falling water fills every corner. La Tourelle Falls offers a different spectacle altogether. Here, the water plunges 240 feet in a single unbroken column, free-falling past yellow lichen-stained basalt cliffs. The trail passes directly behind the spray at the base, allowing visitors to feel the force of the cascade against exposed rock. These 3 waterfalls represent only a fraction of what the gorge contains, yet each reveals how patiently water has worked to sculpt this landscape. Yet every journey into these wild extremes passes through places where civilization meets the edge of wilderness. Seattle rises between Puget Sound and the Cascade foothills, a city built on rain and ambition. Here, urban energy pulses against a backdrop of distant volcanic peaks. The skyline tells a story of a place that grew from timber camps into a metropolis without ever forgetting the mountains watching over it. The Space Needle stands as the city's most recognizable silhouette against those peaks. Built for the 1962 World's Fair, it rises over 600 feet above the ground. The observation deck offers views that stretch from Mount Rainier to the Olympic Range on clear days. At its base, Seattle Center sprawls with museums and performance halls, a cultural hub born from that same fair 6 decades past. Pike Place Market has operated along the waterfront since 1907. Fishmongers still toss salmon through the air as they have for generations. Farmers stack produce beneath hand-painted signs while craftspeople sell wares from stalls worn smooth by countless hands. The market exists as a living artifact, unchanged in spirit even as the city transformed around it. Lake Washington stretches along the city's eastern edge, separating Seattle from its suburban neighbors. The freshwater expanse runs nearly 22 miles from north to south. Floating bridges cross its surface, engineering solutions born from depths too great for traditional supports. Along its shores, parks and beaches offer quiet refuge where residents escape the urban rhythm without ever leaving city limits. North across the border, another city rises where urban life meets untamed nature. This coastal city rises between mountains and sea, its glass towers reflecting both sky and water. Here, the Pacific Northwest announces itself not through wilderness alone, but through the way nature threads through the city itself. Stanley Park stretches across 1,000 acres at the edge of downtown. A peninsula of old-growth forest surrounded by salt water. Western red cedars tower overhead, some standing since before European contact with this coast. The seawall curves for nearly 10 kilometers around the park's perimeter, offering views across Burrard Inlet to the North Shore Mountains. Ravens call from branches draped in moss, while harbor seals surface in the waters below. Gastown claims its place as the city's oldest neighborhood. Its streets paved with brick and lined with Victorian architecture. The steam clock on Water Street whistles every 15 minutes, powered by the same underground steam system that heats nearby buildings. Iron lampposts and heritage storefronts create a district that feels lifted from another century. Yet the neighborhood remains alive with local commerce, its character shaped by over 150 years of continuous occupation. An hour north of Vancouver's glass towers, those same restless forces carved a valley built for adventure. Whistler sits in a valley where glaciers once ground through granite, leaving behind a landscape built for adventure. Two massive peaks flank the village, their slopes rising more than a mile above the valley floor. This is mountain terrain on a scale that shifts perspective. Whistler Blackcomb ranks among North America's largest ski resorts, spanning over 8,000 acres of skiable terrain. The Twin Mountains offer more than 200 marked runs, from gentle beginner slopes to steep chutes that challenge experts. In summer, the same terrain transforms into a network of hiking and biking trails. Alpine meadows burst with wildflowers, while marmots whistle warnings from rocky outcrops above the tree line. The peak-to-peak gondola connects the two mountains in a feat of engineering that defies belief. Suspended over 415 meters above the valley floor, it holds the record for the highest lift of its kind in the world. The journey spans 3 kilometers between peaks, offering unobstructed views of glaciers, volcanic summits, and forests that stretch to distant horizons. Glass-bottomed cabins reveal the dizzying drop below, where Fitzsimmons Creek threads through old-growth timber. For 11 minutes, passengers float between worlds and watching the landscape unfold like a living map of the Coast Range. Returning to Washington, the foothills east of Seattle hold one of the Pacific Northwest's most powerful natural spectacles. Here, ancient forests give way to river valleys carved by glacial meltwater over thousands of years. The land rises and falls in gentle waves before dropping suddenly into dramatic gorges. This is where the Cascade foothills meet lowland river systems in a collision of water and stone. Snoqualmie Falls plunges nearly 270 feet into a rocky basin below, sending clouds of mist rising through surrounding evergreens. The falls drop almost 100 feet farther than Niagara, though they carry a fraction of the water volume. What the Cascade lacks in width, it gains in raw, vertical drama. The Snoqualmie River gathers strength from countless mountain tributaries before making this single, thundering descent. The Snoqualmie people have called this place sacred for generations beyond counting. They believe the mist carries prayers upward to the Creator. Observation platforms now allow visitors to stand at the canyon rim, feeling spray on their faces while old-growth cedars frame the view. Below the falls, a hydroelectric plant built in 1899 still generates power. Hidden within the gorge walls where few visitors venture. The river continues its path westward after the drop. Flowing calm and quiet, as though nothing remarkable had happened at all. Northwest of Snoqualmie's thundering Cascade, restless Pacific waters carve through island passages at Deception Pass State Park. This stretch of Washington coastline sits where Whidbey Island nearly touches Fidalgo Island, separated by a narrow channel of churning tides. The park sprawls across both islands, covering more than 4,000 acres of old-growth forest, rocky shoreline, and freshwater lakes. Here, the sea moves with purpose, funneling through gaps that native peoples navigated for thousands of years before European maps gave the waters their misleading name. Deception Pass Bridge commands attention long before reaching either shore. Completed in 1935, this steel structure arcs 180 feet above the swirling currents below. Two spans connect the islands, meeting at a small rocky outcrop called Pass Island in between. The Civilian Conservation Corps built this crossing during the Great Depression, and their work still carries traffic today. Walking the bridge offers views that stop visitors mid-stride, where emerald waters race through the gap with visible force. The tidal currents beneath the bridge can reach 8 knots during peak flow. This creates standing waves and whirlpools that kayakers either seek out or carefully avoid. From viewpoints along the bridge walkway, the water's movement becomes almost hypnotic. Fog often rolls through the pass, wrapping the steel towers in gray, while forests on either side fade from view. When the mist clears, the San Juan Islands scatter across the northern horizon like stepping stones laid by giants. South, along that same Pacific edge, the Oregon coast unfolds in dramatic contrast to Washington's island channels. Here, the same forces that built volcanic peaks have carved a shoreline of dramatic contrasts. Rocky headlands jut into cold waters, while wide sandy beaches stretch between them. This is where the restless energy of the Pacific expresses itself in wave and stone. Cannon Beach draws visitors to one of the most photographed stretches of the entire West Coast. The small coastal town sits tucked against forested hillsides, its main street, lined with weathered cedar shingles and gallery windows. Tide pools form in the rocky shelves when waters recede, revealing sea stars and anemones in miniature worlds. The beach itself runs for miles, firm sand perfect for walking as mist rolls in from the open ocean. Haystack Rock rises 235 feet from the surf, a basalt monolith that anchors the entire scene. Formed by ancient lava flows some 15 million years ago, this sea stack now hosts one of the most accessible seabird colonies in Oregon. Tufted puffins nest in its crevices during breeding season, their colorful beaks visible from the shore below. At low tide, visitors can walk right up to its base, standing in the shadow of geology measured in deep time, while waves break against stone that remembers when this coast looked nothing like it does today. Inland from those wave-battered shores, Oregon's highest peak commands the horizon. Mount Hood rises to over 11,000 feet, its glaciated summit visible from 100 miles on clear days. 11 glaciers still cling to its slopes, remnants of ice ages that carved the valleys below. This stratovolcano last erupted in the 1850s, and thermal vents near the summit remind visitors that the mountain merely sleeps. Trillium Lake sits in a glacial basin on the mountain's southern flank. The water holds such stillness at dawn that Hood's reflection appears complete to forest line. Created in the 1960s, when a small dam blocked Mud Creek, the lake has since become one of the most photographed spots in Oregon. Western red cedars and Douglas firs ring the shoreline, their branches filtering light into soft columns that reach the water's edge. Higher on the mountain, Timberline Lodge stands at 6,000 feet as a monument to craftsmanship and federal ambition. Built during the Great Depression by workers from the Works Progress Administration, every detail was carved, forged, or woven by hand. Massive timbers frame the Great Hall, where a central fireplace rises through multiple floors. Outside, the lodge faces Palmer Glacier, where skiing continues even through summer months when snow still blankets the upper reaches. South of Hood's solitary cone, 3 more volcanic summits rise side by side in central Oregon. The Three Sisters Wilderness sprawls across nearly 300,000 acres of volcanic terrain. 3 dormant volcanoes stand side by side here, their glaciated summits rising above 10,000 feet. This protected land holds some of the most dramatic alpine scenery in the entire Cascade Range. Broken Top commands attention with its shattered profile against the Oregon sky. This ancient stratovolcano lost its summit to explosive eruptions and glacial erosion long ago. What remains is a jagged crescent of rust-colored rock, its exposed interior revealing layers of volcanic history. The mountain stands just over 9,000 feet, yet its ruined form appears more imposing than many taller peaks nearby. Glacial cirques carve deep into the mountain's flanks, holding snowfields well into summer months. Meltwater feeds alpine lakes that shimmer in impossible shades of blue and green. The approach trails wind through meadows thick with wildflowers during brief growing seasons. From certain angles, the broken crater frames views of the Three Sisters themselves, creating landscapes that feel lifted from another geological age entirely. Between these volcanic peaks and the coast, Portland offers a different kind of Pacific Northwest landmark. This city sits at the meeting point of two rivers, cradled by forested hills and watched over by distant volcanic peaks. Portland has long attracted those who think differently, and its streets reflect that independent character. Here, the unconventional finds a welcome home. Powell's Books occupies an entire city block in the Pearl District, a labyrinth of rooms organized by color-coded sections. Founded in 1971, it grew into the largest independent bookstore in the world. New and used volumes share shelf space, their spines holding stories both fresh and weathered by decades of hands. Visitors lose hours wandering through more than 1 million books, the scent of paper and ink hanging in the air like something sacred. Across town, a different kind of wonder waits at a traffic median on Southwest Naito Parkway. Helens Park measures just 2 feet across. Officially recognized as the smallest park on Earth. A local journalist created it in 1948, planting flowers in an abandoned hole meant for a light pole. The tiny circle of green has hosted weddings, swimming pool installations for butterflies, and visits from dignitaries. Portland claims many oddities, but this miniature park captures the city's playful soul in 24 inches of soil. Returning to British Columbia's coast mountains, Garibaldi Provincial Park holds some of the most striking volcanic terrain in the entire region. Glaciers have carved deep valleys here, leaving behind landscapes that shift from dense coastal forest to raw alpine wilderness within a single afternoon's hike. The park spans nearly 2,000 square kilometers of protected land. Ancient volcanic activity and glacial retreat have shaped every ridge and basin we see today. Garibaldi Lake sits in a basin formed by a volcanic dam, its waters holding a color that seems almost impossible in nature. Glacial sediment suspended in the lake creates this intense turquoise hue, brightest under summer sun. The barrier, plus a wall of volcanic rock, holds these waters in place against the valley below. Surrounding peaks reflect perfectly on calm days, doubling the scene into mirror images of stone and ice. Black Tusk Mountain rises above the park like a fractured spire of dark volcanic rock. This jagged peak formed from the hardened core of an ancient volcano. Exposed after softer surrounding rock eroded away over countless millennia. The mountain stands at over 2,300 meters, visible from trails throughout the southern portion of the park. Its distinctive silhouette has drawn hikers and climbers for generations. A landmark that dominates the skyline with weathered authority. Far to the south, the Cascade Range ends, where the earth still breathes with volcanic fire. Lassen Volcanic National Park sits at a crossroads of geological forces found nowhere else on the continent. Here, all four types of volcanoes known to science stand within a single protected boundary. The park remains one of the few places in North America where the ground itself reminds visitors that the planet beneath their feet is never truly still. Bumpass Hell offers the most dramatic proof of the volcanic energy simmering below. This 16-acre hydrothermal basin sprawls across a mountainside, its surface broken by boiling pools and hissing steam vents. Mud pots bubble with thick, clay-rich water heated by magma chambers that lie just a few miles beneath the surface. The smell of sulfur hangs in the air, sharp and unmistakable, rising from fumaroles that reach temperatures exceeding 300 degrees. Boardwalks wind through the basin, keeping visitors safely above ground that could collapse into scalding pools without warning. The area takes its name from Kendall Van Hook Bumpass, a cowboy and tour guide who discovered the basin in the 1860s. His exploration ended badly when he broke through thin crust and severely burned his leg, later losing it to the injury. The story serves as a lasting reminder of the genuine danger that exists here. Despite the wooden walkways and warning signs, Bumpass Hell remains an active volcanic system, where the rules of ordinary landscapes do not apply. Steam rises from vents year-round, even when winter snow blankets the surrounding peaks in white silence. Continuing south through Northern California, the Cascade Range announces itself with unmistakable authority. Mount Shasta region rises from the surrounding valleys like a sentinel, marking the southern edge of volcanic country. Here, the same restless forces that built the Pacific Rim created something singular and commanding. Mount Shasta stands alone in a way few mountains do. At over 14,000 feet, its glaciated cone dominates the horizon for 100 miles in every direction. 5 glaciers cling to its slopes, the largest concentration of ice in California outside the Sierra Nevada. Steam vents near the summit remind visitors that this volcano merely sleeps. Its last eruption occurred roughly 200 years ago, a blink in geological time. The mountain draws more than climbers and geologists to its flanks. Springs fed by snowmelt pour from its base at remarkable volume, some of the purest water on the continent. Ancient forests of red fir and mountain hemlock carpet the lower elevations, giving way to alpine meadows where wildflowers bloom in brief summer windows. The peak creates its own weather, catching Pacific moisture and wrapping itself in lenticular clouds that hover like stacked saucers above the summit. Back in Washington, glaciers carved a passage so deep it now holds one of the nation's most striking bodies of water. Lake Chelan stretches more than 50 miles through the North Cascades, its waters reaching depths of over 1,400 feet. This makes it the third deepest lake in the United States. The surrounding peaks rise sharply from shorelines that shift from desert scrub to alpine forest within a single glance. At the lake's remote northern tip sits Stehekin Village, a community unreachable by road. Visitors arrive only by boat, float plane, or foot trail through the wilderness. Fewer than 100 residents call this place home year-round. The village operates on its own rhythm, undisconnected from highways and the pace they bring. A single road runs 9 miles up the valley before ending at trailheads leading deeper into the backcountry. Stehekin has remained this way for over a century, its isolation preserved by geography rather than intention. The Stehekin River flows through the valley, fed by glaciers that still cling to peaks above. Historic buildings dot the landscape, including a one-room schoolhouse and a bakery that draws hikers from miles away. Time moves differently here, measured in ferry schedules and seasons rather than hours and appointments. West of Lake Chelan's remote shores, the Pacific meets the Salish Sea in waters scattered with green islands rising from cold depths. The San Juan Islands form an archipelago of nearly 500 land masses, though only a handful hold permanent residence. Glaciers carved this maze of channels and passages during the last ice age. What remains is a world apart from the mainland, reached only by ferry or small aircraft. The island archipelago stretches across a region where 3 nations once claimed sovereignty. Today, quiet harbors and forested shorelines define the landscape. Orcas Island lifts its shoulders into Moran State Park, where old-growth forest climbs toward Mount Constitution. San Juan Island holds open prairies and historic sites from a 19th-century boundary dispute. Lopez Island moves at an even slower pace. Known for its rolling farmland and cyclists waving to strangers on empty roads. These whale-watching waters draw visitors from distant continents, hoping for a glimpse of resident orca pods. The Salish Sea supports one of the most studied killer whale populations on Earth. Black dorsal fins slice through grey swells, while researchers track family groups that have hunted these channels for generations. Humpbacks and grey whales pass through seasonally, following ancient migration routes along the coast. From rocky promontories, and patient observers witness scenes unchanged since before European sails appeared on the horizon. "20 wild places later, the Pacific Northwest leaves its mark not through any single vista, but through the weight of everything encountered along the way. Volcanic steam rising from Bumpass Hell. The impossible blue of Crater Lake holding still beneath caldera walls. Orca fins cutting through the grey waters of the San Juan Islands. These moments accumulate like sediment, layer upon layer, until the landscape becomes something carried rather than simply seen. What remains after the miles fade is the scale of it all. The way Mount Shasta commands the horizon from 100 miles distant. The silence of Stihican village, unreachable except by water or trail. The turquoise glow of Diablo Lake suspended in its valley of granite and ice. This region asks nothing of those who pass through except attention. And it rewards that attention with views that reshape how distance and time are understood. Click on the video that's appearing now to continue your journey of the wonders of the world.